Alright, good evening guys. Monday the 17th of August, I believe, 2020. And just coming up to about 5 after 9. And we're just getting out to the garage for a quick power hour before bedtime. Certainly getting dark a lot earlier these days. We had a lot of rain today. Still, you can hear the eavesdrops dripping. But anyway, we'll put in a bit of an hour tonight on this transmission and see if we can get it to clean up a little bit better. So I did do a little practicing last night before I came in, and I think we can probably get it to look pretty good. Normally I just scratch these down and paint them with a quick coat of aluminum paint, but in this case I'm not sure what we'll do. We might even just scrub it down, see how well it comes up, and then maybe just clear coat it, or we'll just leave it, or we still might resort to a bit of aluminum paint depending on how it comes up. So anyway, let's get to work. And there's the before pictures, so we'll have a look probably in a couple hours. It'll probably take me to clean this up, so we'll do the best we can. I do have some new gaskets for it, for the seal at the front. I believe I have a gasket for, and I believe I have a top cover gasket as well. So we'll do those after we clean it up. Alright guys, power hour begins. Alright guys, we're making pretty good progress cleaning the trans up, but we're going to now remove the rear trans mount. So it's these big 3/4 inch bolts on either side. You can see that's got a castle nut on the bottom. I don't think you can see that there. So we're going to remove these two bolts, one this side, one the other side, and remove the rear trans mount, and we'll bring it back. Alright guys, rear trans mount is off, and here's what it looks like. Pretty knackered, pretty perished as they would say. So we've got the new trans mount for this. We'll clean this bracket up. Actually, I believe there's a bracket on the frame already, so well, we may clean this up anyway and replace the one that's on the frame. So that just fits like that. So you can see the orientation of the line sort of going back towards the input shaft, or output shaft actually. So there you go. So we'll swap that guy out and get back to cleaning. Alright guys, just coming up to 10 after 10, so our power hour is done for tonight. We got a pretty good start on doing the cleaning. Got both sides pretty much done. I've got to flip it over and do the bottom side. Remove that mount, of course, and yeah, it's looking pretty good. So tomorrow we'll remove the top cover, renew that gasket, clean up the switches. We'll do the output shaft seal on the front. And a few other things. We'll maybe check the, this is the angle drive for the speedometer back here. Maybe we'll pull that and just check how it looks. And I think there might be an O-ring in there. We'll just have a quick inspection as to what that looks like. And then we'll start working on the operating shaft and the release bearing fork. And we'll drill that shaft for a new a bolt to help out the shear pin, or the taper pin, I guess you want to call it. So anyway, that's it for tonight guys. We'll get back out here tomorrow and continue on. Alright guys, Tuesday night after work, and we're just checking out where we left off last night, and transmission is looking pretty good in the daylight. I still need to clean the bottom of it, but from the top side it looks not bad. I don't think I'm going to bother painting or clear coating. I think we're just going to leave it au naturel. Once we get it cleaned up, we'll check the wiring on the top. There is one suspect wire that's got a little bit of, looks like it's got a little bit of chafing against this clamp over here. So we'll take a look at that once we get the cover off and regasket that. So yeah, so just the bottom needs to be cleaned up. The top you won't really see anyway because it's going to be under a cover. So it's really the only the bottom of the trans that you can see once it's installed in the frame and everything is covered up. So having said that, I did bring some new parts out of the house, and I'll just go through what I brought out. So talking about gaskets, so I do have a new gasket set here for sealing up this transmission. So here's the top cover gasket here, the input shaft, or the output shaft, I guess you can call it. There's a gasket there for that, and it looks like I've got this is for, I think, the ring, which I'm not going to probably be taking this apart too far, so that probably will not be used. And it looks like I got a couple of differential gaskets there extra. Also brought out the throwout bearing that we're going to be using. We're going to be using a Koyo throwout bearing. Here is the new collar for that. These two need to be pressed on. I actually have an old collar and brand new bearing that needs to be fully pressed on. What I'm going to do, I think Alin is going to be stopping by tonight just to inspect my work, and I've asked him if he wouldn't mind taking this into work, these two sets, and pressing them on with his press. So I think he's going to do that for me, so that will be great. Dowel pins, we'll have a little discussion about this. These are extremely important when you're mounting your transmission to your engine block as far as alignment is concerned, so we'll talk a little bit more about these. And this is the actual clutch slave bracket that we'll install on the trans as well once we get it mounted up to the engine. So again, just a few more parts to go through and put on the car. So what I'll do first, I think, is probably clean the bottom of the transmission, and then we'll flip that top cover off and start doing the gasketing. Alright guys, that's it. Alright guys, one of the other things I need to do is to clean up the rear transmission mount. So here's the old one and the old bracket that fits on the chassis. So I've got the new mount here. So what I need to do is just take the old mount off, just a couple bolts on the bottom. And what we'll do is we'll scratch down the old bracket. We'll get that painted rather quickly, put the new mount on, and then we'll fix it back to the trans. That's looking pretty good now on the bottom. I'm pretty happy with that. That's about as clean as it's going to get. Maybe one more quick wipe down, and that will be good to go. So, moving right along. Alright, we stripped and painted the rear trans mount bracket, and we're just about to take the cover off the trans, so I just wanted to give you a quick shot of it before. Now, I'm not exactly sure what these switches do as far as location is concerned, but I do know that one of them is for a reverse switch, so it'll actually turn your reverse lights on, and the others are for the overdrive engagement. So it's basically a little ball in the bottom of these switches, a little detente in the rods that push this. So this is an A-type overdrive, so it's got engagement in second, third, and fourth gear. So one of these will probably be a second gear switch, and the other will be the third and fourth gear switch. Again, I'm not sure exactly which one is corresponding to the rods that run underneath the cover, but that's what those switches do. So again, there's a little ball bearing that pushes up once it hits, or actually pushes up or lowers down. I'm not exactly sure how it works. I think it actually lowers down, so it's under spring pressure, so I think it lowers down when it hits the detent, and then sends the signal to the solenoid over here, which is detached from this wire here. So that's what those switches are all about. I wish I could be more specific on what they actually control, but I wouldn't be able to tell you that unless I actually looked it up, and that's going to slow me down, so you'll have to look it up yourself. Anyway, just about to take the top cover off. We got the gear in neutral, and make sure it goes back that way. Hopefully nothing will jump out at me, and hopefully the gears look good inside this. Otherwise we might have a little bit more of a setback. So we'll pull this off, and we'll have a look at the gasket, if there is a gasket, and we'll clean that up and put a new gasket in there. Oh, incidentally, the top cover bolts, I kind of took a photograph because everything needs to go back where it needs to go back, obviously. So you've got a couple of ground wires here, for example, that's got to go back. There's a ground wire, or not a ground wire, but a strap over here that's got to go back here. So I took a photograph to enable me to put this back the way it came off the car. Not only that, I also wanted to keep track of the bolts. So what I've done is I've just arranged them on top of this case here. So you can see that the rear bolts, which are back here, so I've got the bolts sort of facing this direction. So the two rears are slightly longer than the two fronts, so I wanted to make note of that. Two middles doesn't really matter, they're the same length, but just an FYI, sometimes it's a good idea to lay the bolts out and not intermix them, because you may forget where long versus short bolts go. Just having a quick look at the teeth on the gears, and everything looks really good actually. It's fresh GL4 oil in there. I remember I put that in there when we took it up to Alin's to do the overdrive test. So yeah, the gears look great, to be in great condition. There is a gasket actually stuck to the top side here, so we'll clean this face up and any of the other little areas that we couldn't get to previously, and then we'll apply the new gasket. We'll do a little bit of aviation on form a gasket on both sides of this, bottom of this, top of the gasket, and the top of the cover, and then we'll put that back on and seal it up. Beer time. So as mentioned, Alin stopped by to pick up those release bearings for me. So just happened to have some beer in the fridge, so
some mini beer.
You might have a quick break. Got the Spitfire there at the end of the driveway. All the neighbors ogling over it as they walk by, walking their dogs. A couple of them have tried to jump in and take off, but they don't know how to drive standard. So, well, they don't know how to drive standard, so you're safe.
No, there's no clutch.
Alright guys, there's the new top cover gasket installed, and we've got the Permatex Aviation on the top cover as well as the bottom cover underneath that gasket. So we're just about ready to pop the top back on and secure it back down. Alright guys, we're just at the front of the transmission now. I just done a bit of a cleanup with some WD-40 in there and wiped it down. We're just about to remove the cross shaft. So what we need to do is clip the safety wire on the pin, and then remove the pin so we can remove the clutch, or the operating fork that operates the release bearing, and then we'll be able to slide the shaft out and go from there. Hopefully the pin is not broken, because it can be problematic to get that shaft out if the pin is actually broken inside. So wish me luck. Alright guys, I managed to get the pin out, and it doesn't look like it's broken, which is a good thing. So I'm just working that little carrier, or little fork off of the cross shaft, and I'm just basically rocking it back. I've lubed up the shaft with some WD-40, so I'm basically moving it out the right side and just sort of wiggling it back and forth as I move the fork across off the end of the shaft to be able to get this out. So that's what we're up to. Alright guys, here's a quick look of the cross shaft with that infamous pin that likes to break. So that's how it's sort of located here on the shaft. So if I just move this pin out, sorry to get you out of frame here, I'm just trying to do this one-handed, and slide that across, you can see there's the orifice for that pin to fit through. So it does actually go through the shaft and lock that fork in place. When the pin breaks, it causes the fork not to be able to move properly, and therefore it can't operate the throwout bearing properly, and then you lose your clutch. So what the objective is here now is to actually put a bolt in addition to this pin, just to help out with the broken pin issue. So we're going to do that now. Okay, this would be much easier if I had an actual drill press to work with, but I don't, so we're going to hand drill this carefully. We're going to drill a pilot first and then enlarge it. So we're going to drill this. The pin is locked down tightly on the shaft, so this cannot move. So we're going to center the pilot hole right here in the middle, and like I said, we'll drill that completely all the way through. The objective is to put a tight fitting bolt in there. So we want to have something like this with a shank on it, but then just a few threads protruding so we can get a nylock on the back end. So that's what we're planning on doing. So I'm going to find something to fasten this with that's going to work. I may have to cut the threads down on the other side, but we'll figure it out as we go along. So I'm going to start by drilling my pilot hole anyway. Alright guys, there's our pilot drilled. So we're going to start the enlarging process, and we'll work our way up until we get to a nice tight fitting bolt in there, and we'll bring you back when we get to that point. Incidentally, when I was looking for a fastener, I found an old pin, and this is generally what they look like when they come out, already broken. So I just thought I'd take a quick shot of that. So that's what a broken pin looks like. Alright guys, here's what we finally decided upon in the end. So we're going to be using a bolt that is approximately the same size, or is the same size as the tapered pin. So I may have to cut some threads off. I do have a nylock nut for this, so we're going to enlarge this hole to match this bolt, the cadmium coated one, and we're going to ensure that it's a tight fit. So we might need to ream that out slightly just to make sure it's a tight fit, and again I may need to trim some threads, but we'll see in a little bit. Alright, there's our new safety bolt, and we've got the nylock to go on the back. So we'll go ahead and we'll reinstall this. I'll get my new pin out, and we'll re-safety wire this, and we'll get this installed back in. I'm going to check the gasket at the front here first before I install this, because that's my only opportunity to do so. So I'll go ahead and I'll do that now. The other thing we might want to do while you're here is to check this surface here where the bearing slides, and make sure that's nice and smooth. If not, you may want to give it a quick polish with some emery cloth or some 3000 grit, whatever you've got. So make sure there's no scoring or marking there, because that'll affect your clutch operation. Alright. Alright, so there's the new taper pin. So we're going to go ahead and install that. We'll get our safety wire ready. So we'll go ahead and we'll install that cross shaft now with the new bolt, and I'll bring you back when we're done. Alright, just before we put it back together, there's the old taper pin hole. There's the new hole, and I did a pretty good job of getting that centered, considering I didn't have a drill press, and that's just drilled by hand. So I think we're in good shape. So we'll put it back together. Alright guys, we've got everything buttoned up. We've got our lock wire secured. We've checked to make sure we have clearance on the back side for the new through bolt that we drilled. We want to make sure it didn't foul on anything on the rear of the case. And that's good. We've got free movement of that carrier, or of the fork basically. The only other wear item you might want to inspect are the little pins on the cross fork to make sure that they're in good shape, that ride in the sleeve in the channel on the bearing carrier. So if those are in good shape, you don't need to replace them. Otherwise, I believe they just press out. I've never really needed to replace those. They seem to wear pretty well. So that's pretty much it for the front of the transmission. We're going to go back to the rear, and we're going to put our newly painted, fresh rear transmission bush. So one last part to put on before we call it a night. There's the new rear trans mount and the rubber bush. So we'll go ahead and mount that. We've got new hardware here with new nylocks. So we'll put that back on the back of the trans where it should go, and we'll just fit it loosely for now. We'll tighten it up once we get it back on the car. Alright guys, Bob's your uncle. New rear trans mount is installed. So I think we're good to go on the transmission. That can go back on the car. Once we get the throwout bearing, we'll be good. So I think as of tomorrow night, this can get attached to what's under that bag. Alright guys, we'll call it a night. We'll call this a video, and we'll upload this tonight hopefully, or tomorrow morning. And we'll get back out here tomorrow night and have a bit more fun. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow. Good night.